Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchedoye alahuri sanmyao sanputoshe. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jie nan zao yu. Wo jin jian wen de shou chi, yan jie ru lai zhen shi yi. I'll give you the line. Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a million eons. But now we see and hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. 师父上人，各位师兄，阿弥陀佛，大家。Venerable Master, Dharma friends, welcome to our Sutra lecture tonight. We're looking into the seventh ground of the Flower Garland Sutra, and I think our camera in the center, I turned on the overhead lights there, so you might want to check the white balance. It's brighter than it was when it was first set up. So, okay, check the exposure there, get it all tuned in, dialed in. We're going to first begin tonight by chanting the name of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the Avatamsaka Assembly and the name of the sutra found there on the front of your sutra book. Namo Da Fang Guang Fu Hua Yan Ji 华严海为佛菩萨，南无大放光佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨，南无大放光佛华严经。 华严海会佛菩萨，南无大放光佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨，南无大放华严经，华严海会。 佛菩萨，南无大放光佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨，南无大放华严经，华严海会。 菩萨南无大放华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。Welcome to everybody who's joining us online tonight, or if you're watching this later. Archived on our YouTube channel. We have a smaller house than usual tonight here in the flesh because Guanyin Bodhisattva recitation session is happening up at City of 10,000 Buddhas. And a lot of people have gone up. I think they went up early to beat the storm because we are here in California experiencing the first rain storm since April 22nd, which is 6 months without rain. Any rain, that is. So now the storm is coming in with strength. I saw some accounts that called it a storm without precedent, people were saying, particularly up on the Oregon coast. And that's strong language. Winds were on the coast, were blowing in at 60 miles an hour this afternoon. And that was even before the rain hit. So this may be, in certain parts of Northern California, quite a blow, flooding and such. Here in Berkeley, we have trees next door here. We've got a cypress, big, tall tree that the under leaves are brown. You know, the leaves that aren't supposed to turn ever if it's healthy. And so they're at a critical phase of water deprivation. They're thirsty to the point of dying of thirst. And this rain will help a little. It'd be nice if it fell gradually instead of all at once, but we'll take it however it falls. So, all right. Can I direct your attention, please, to pages 56 and 57 in our book? 56, 57. And we want to, on the Chinese side, we want to do the last three lines, starting with He Yi Gu. And on the English, that will be the paragraph that begins, and why is that? Okay, can I read it and you can follow if you would like to do that? He Yi Gu. 菩萨从初地乃至第七地，成就至功用分，以此立故，从第八地乃至第十地，无功用行，皆悉成就。Okay, over to the right. And why is that? Let's see. We're going to read this together in unison. All right? Let's just read it instead of call and response. We'll do it together. Here we go. And why is that? Because from the first ground up to and including the seventh ground, the Bodhisattva successfully completes the shares involving application of wisdom. Because of the strength he gains by doing that, the effortless practices on the 8th ground to the 10th ground are all successfully accomplished. Okay. We catch this in mid-sentence, also in mid-idea, and I'll review just a little bit so we can kind of make sense of it, and then we're launching into a section of parables, a section of metaphor. Pictures meant to help us explain something that we can't get through language and logic. So we get a picture of something else, then we can infer over, oh, if I understand that picture, then the thing we're talking about must be something like that. What is being discussed? What's being discussed is the answer to a question. The question was from one bodhisattva asking another bodhisattva. The other bodhisattva answered saying what are called the Bodhi share dharmas, the wings of enlightenment, the steps to liberation, all these different names, the Bodhi share dharmas. They are cultivated in every ground. As the bodhisattva goes up or deeper into his or her cultivation. When you get to the 7th ground out of 10, these Bodhisattva dharmas are cultivated most effectively. Why? That's where we are. Okay? We've been going through this step by step slowly, so I think instead of looking backwards again, we're going to look forward. Why is that true? Why do the Bodhisattva dharmas cultivated better on the 7th ground? It's because, says our Bodhisattva, it has to do with something called 智功用, fun and 无功用行. 2 things. That's cultivating wisdom with effort and cultivating effortlessly. When you get to the 7th, it shifts. The Bodhisattva up to the 7th has been using wisdom with effort. From the 7th on, so it merges there, and then 8, 9, and 10, the Bodhisattva can cultivate these same practices from a different place, from a place that is kind of like automatic pilot. That's the answer. And here, what did he say tonight? He says, 菩萨从初地乃至第七地成就智功用分. So that's from ground 1 to ground 7, the Bodhisattva accomplishes the cultivation through using wisdom. He's able to apply wisdom and get the function of those practices. 以此立故, and because of the strength he gets from doing that, it says, 从第八地乃至第十地, from 8 to 10, 无功用行皆系成就. He accomplishes effortless practice. Okay. I told that story that I know people remember because it's kind of startling about Master Hua coming into the Chan session. I had just arrived at City of 10,000 Buddhas earlier, arriving in October of 1979, and 2 months later came our winter Chan. We do, at that time I think it was 10 days. Maybe it was even 7. We did Amitabha for a week and Chan for a week. That was how it was always set up. Later on we did longer weeks and adjusted the time, but then it was a week. And we did it in what is now called the small dining room, where the students eat, you know. At that time it was called the Medicine Buddha Hall, Yao Shi Dian. The 5 Contemplations dining hall hadn't been built then. We had been sitting in meditation for days. It was like 4th day or so. And we were all kind of at that state where you're not quite alert, but you're also not sleeping either. And we're doing, 21 hours of effort every day, 11 hours of sitting and the rest walking. And you really discover what you're made of during those kind of sessions. And it was day and night are kind of the same, walking and sitting are kind of the same, eating and hungry are kind of the same. You're awake and asleep are kind of the same, and it's like that. And you're just waiting. When the bell rings, you stand up because you've been sitting there for meditating hard for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Okay, Master Hua walks in the hall, and you could just feel that he was walking briskly like this, and you could see his robe swing back and forth as he walked in. And his purpose was to shake us out of our torpor, and boy did he do it. He made the statement. He said, "You all don't know how to meditate." He said, "Do you know what I do?" And we're like, Shifu talking, huh? We're like barely registering, and Shifu says, "I am always reciting the Buddha's name. I am never not reciting the Buddha's name, even if I'm meditating." We're like, oh wow, Shifu he's really mindful, strong mind, And then he said, do you know what I can do? He said, I am always, always reciting mantras. I am never not reciting mantras. Now we're like, oh, Shifu at the same time, He said, do you know what I can do? I am always, always reciting sutras, and I never lose my place. I'm not like you. I know exactly how many Buddha's names I've recited, exactly where I am in my mantra. I am exactly on my time in my sutra, and I never repeat. He said. Walked out and closed the door. We're like, huh? What was that? And it was like, it just filtered like either Shifu's a freak, or I have no idea what I'm doing when I meditate. I am so not in charge of my mind. And he, it wasn't the sound of compassion, it was the sound of hammer on steel, like that. It shook us up because, when you think about it, just normal fuzzy mind, which is my state, I can't even keep track. Whether I'm awake or asleep, it's not really different. And if I eat a lot of sugar during the day, I'm really fuzzy. And if I don't get enough food, something inside is going, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. No control over my mind. And here's Shifu saying that he is completely in charge of 3 tracks of his mind, doing different things, never jumbled a bit, at the same time. And you think, what is that? What in the world could that be? And I'm not suggesting that I understand that at all. It was a shock to hear that. And that is so unlike Master Hua to talk about his state at any point for us, because how could you appreciate that? You either think that's weird, or you discard it. You discredit it. You don't take it seriously. He meant it, I'm assuming. And you think, what kind of clarity in his mind is required to do that, whatever that is? A 3-track mind? Is that not single-minded? Well, it's single-minded to an amazing state, right? So, Buddha's name, Namo Amitofu, mantra, Namo Haladano Dola Ye, or Namo Mani Padme Hum. And thus I have heard at one time, all running parallel and never jumbled and never out of place. It's like, okay. Number 1, clarity. That must be really clear. Number 2, it's not normal conscious discrimination. I think that's the takeaway. It's not the normal mind. It's not that somehow Shifu's got a second head or a third head. There's something else going there. Now, if you just deny it, if that's not possible, then forget it. That's just, freak behavior. That would be to really lose the opportunity to learn about what's possible. When I hear about the Bodhisattva shifting from practices of effortful cultivation of the 37 limbs of enlightenment, I have to reach for something to make sense of that. And we're going to find out, and we get pictures coming up. We're about to run into the first one. For Shifu to come in and lay that on top of the meditators, well, it worked. After that, we were going, I think I'll try a little harder, Nam, who's mindful of the Buddha? Who's in there reciting, So we sat up a little straighter, trying to think, if Shifu's mind is like that, where am I? Just that's useful, actually. There's no way I can verify, Shifu's describing his state, he's right. I can't verify that or deny it. That's not a place to work, because I can't even imagine what that must be like. But what I can do is ask myself, is there any single practice in my mind that I stick with longer than my next false thought? Right? How long can I stay mindful? At all, right? And then you think, what practices do I have that teach me to stay focused. And right away I think of counting my breath. There's one, you know. How many I give my students at Bond when I teach the intro to meditation to my brand new class of incoming college students, 20-year-olds at university studying Buddhist meditation. We do it's called a tutorial. It's a workshop twice a week on meditation. And I say, okay, here we go. I give the basics of breath counting. I'll do mine up to 5 and back down to 0. So 1, inhale, out, exhale. 2, inhale, exhale. 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll do it at my speed. When I'm done, I'll ring the bell, and you can all tell me how long you stayed on focus, okay? Ring the bell, and, you know, I do mine, count my breath, and ring the bell, and ask how many, you know. And because it's the beginning of the semester, they haven't relaxed around me yet, so they don't know to really tell the truth. A lot of them are kind of exaggerating or don't even know what I'm asking them to do. But of 30, there's usually 3 who say, I got 5. And then depends on when I tell mine. If I say, yeah, I got to 2 before my mind scattered and I thought about what did I forget to teach them, or who's missing today, did I forget to take the role? And if I admit that my mind got only to 2, then a little more candor comes out. So beginning meditators usually, unless their minds are extraordinarily clear, and there are a few, discover right away how hard it is to keep 5 breaths in mind counting without the mind leaping somewhere else. That's hard. Then you go to 10. Then you do it every week, and by week 8, okay, how many were able to go to 5? You get 10 hands out of 30, and you know they did, because they've been keeping a journal. So it's just like muscles that you develop over time. But the transformation in consciousness that's being hinted at here, what about that? What about this actual fundamental change that the Bodhisattva is talking about, where the practices have grooved themselves? Maybe. Right? So for Shifu to say mantras, holy names, sutras in his mind, concurrently running, simultaneously running, never wrong, means he can't be overseeing those. Like the seat. Did I leave out a paragraph of my sutra? You know, should I start over again? Oh, I dropped the 4th hui in my Shurangama mantra. He can't be using ordinary consciousness to oversee it. Something else has to be in place. Right? If you take that on what do you say? Take it for granted? No, if you take it on face value, that's the word. If you trust that Shifu was reporting something, giving us a clue, a hint about the mind of a sage. You ever wonder what a meditator's mind is like? A real meditator? Well, for sure, Master Hua was a real meditator. He's an adept. He's an accomplished meditator. And ordinarily, he wouldn't show us what he could do. Why? Why would he bother, you know? Except he saw us all fuzzy in our meditation. He wanted to shake us up a bit. So he kind of opened the cupboard door a little bit and said, this is going on. This is one of my states. Okay, so it's like, whoa. I suspect for Shifu to be able to do that, something like this was happening. Something like the Wu Gong Yong Heng. We're going to find out what that is. I'm just tossing it out right now. Okay, what does it say? 从无功用恒皆悉成就. The effortless practices are all accomplished from 8, 9, and 10. So, in other words, the practices, we're going to talk about them, the 37 limbs, those practices that before required his mind to work inside itself, Did you forget any? No, I didn't. Was that right? That must be right. Nobody said anything. Okay, you're having a conversation in your mind, checking, using the, what would you say, using your conscience. Always let your conscience be your guide. Jiminy Cricket, right? You're using your conscience in there to keep track of your motives. Okay, what is effortful practice? Wisdom's practice, the 6 guidelines. Right? You know our Liu Dazongzhi, right? Master Hua's favorite dharmas, where he would say, ask yourself, am I fighting? Ask myself, is there greed in this motive? Ask myself, am I seeking anything? Ask myself, is this selfish? Ask myself, is this only out to benefit myself? Ask myself, am I lying? Is it true? Right? That is 智功用, huh? Where you put part of your mind onto the other part of your mind. Knowing that what? Knowing that the mind contains all kinds of stuff. You add a cop on top of the truant kids, right, who want to go wrong and don't because they know they're going to be caught, and so bit by bit they get behind doing right. And then at a certain point, both the cop and the criminal in the mind vanish, and the mind shifts. I think the hinge is the self goes away. Because the one who wants to fight greedy, be greedy, seek, be selfish, not share, and lie is the self. Throws a shadow. When the self is gone, there's no shadow left. You've brought the shadow to light, and you can use Jungian terms to talk about that, right? The shadows come to light. There's no self left to throw a shadow. When that happens, you function in a whole new way. It's not that those practices are gone, they're functioning at a higher octave of function, I think. Okay, I'm kind of fishing, because Shifu's comment, that was 1979, stuck with me to this day. A real meditator gave us a clue about what is possible in the mind when you're there, when you've got some amazing, genuine gongfu. So what I'm trying to do is bring this to life. I'm trying to make this sutra real in terms that I understand. Otherwise, you just think, oh, bodhisattvas, like angels in heaven. Who's ever seen one? Well, that's a question. I don't think the sutras are meant to distance us from some great being, luminous and powerful. I think it's saying, look what happens in your mind when you get to this state of stillness and purity. Furthermore, it takes us step by step to how to get there. And the steps are almost always driven by kindness. Almost always driven by a sense of connection and wanting to prevent pain. Wanting to stop hurting for people you care about. That's what moves this bodhisattva further into stillness, further into purity. Okay. So far so good. Does this make sense? It's like, can you imagine the mind shifting into another level? If you'll indulge me, right? Here's this. The harmonic is always there in the string. That note is always there waiting. But you have to bisect the string to get it to sound. Where is this note? It's in the string, always. But if you do that 100 times, you won't get it until you touch it. And there's that note waiting. There are others. There's this one. That divides the string in thirds. There's another one of those down here somewhere. There it is. Those notes are always there, but without touching it in the right place, they don't emerge. Can't get it until, and there it is, waiting in the string. So all those vibrations have been launched out into the air because a finger set them vibrating. So all of that wisdom and compassion and function is launched out into the world because the Bodhisattva's heart set them in action, right? And what is it? It's the Putishin, the Bodhi resolve. Everybody's got it, and the Bodhisattva had it, latent, potential. But then something happened, and he launched out. He started his or her career in cultivation and kept going and kept going. And when you do that, and the secret is, there's a component here that's, quote, the secret, which is what? Rufa. You do it according to Dharma. You do it with the Dharma. Notice I tap my tip of my finger on the top of the string, and this beep, this higher octave emerged. That's the Rufa part. There's a method. Dharma translates as methods. You do it with the method. So you take that motive, which is, I want to stop pain. I want to end suffering for me and others. That's the motive. That's the vibration. And when you put the Dharma around it, the method, the shape, the fingertip, you get this other octave. It comes out of the string. It was there all the time. The Xin Xing, the mind, the human nature, contains all these things. But we have to put the Dharma on them, and the positive, wholesome functions of a higher level come out. Now, let's swap sutras for just a minute. It's ironic, it's really funny. And no, it's not, George Carlin made that clear. It's not ironic, it's coincidental. It is a coincidence that Marty, Professor Verhoeven, is explaining the Six Patriarch Sutras chapter on Chanhui, repentance and renewal, and so am I. We're doing it on the same day. How bizarre. We had no clue. I mean, I never ever talked to him about it. It's just, it's as if we're different continents we're doing this. We're doing it in the same building on the same day. We've reached the same chapter. I twice have listened to Marty at lunch kind of like cribbing his stuff. It's like, what did he say? Maybe I can use that. But I'm sure he does not. I guarantee you he doesn't listen to my broadcast. So there we are. We're on the same chapter. And in this chapter, the Sixth Patriarch is doing some very interesting stuff. He talks about, he says, all of you Shan Zhi Shi, all of you good and wise friends, I'm going to now convey to you 5-fold incenses. Xiang, the same xiang that's burning in the censer behind me. I'm going to convey to you, transmit to you the 5 incenses of our mind and nature. And of course, that's not the right translation. It's not you don't convey an incense. It's kind of like a perfume, a fragrance, a cleansing. And we used the other week, we used smudging. Anybody ever go through Native American smudging? Or also called saging. You take sage, the plant, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. You take sage, light it. If it's California sage, grows wild right around here. Then you depending on who is administering it, you put some sage smoke on your head and perfume your body, and it purifies and clarifies both, prepares you for spiritual presence. It allows the spirit to come in. So the sixth patriarch uses the word xiang like that. I'm going to do the 5 smudges, or the 5 sages, the plant sage, not the being sage. So he says, the sixth patriarch, as he does this, he says, the first is jie xiang, the smudge, the perfume, the cleansing of precepts, or morality, or disciplined behavior, different translations of jie, right? And he says, the mind has greed and anger and jealousy and envy and theft, he says, and harm in it. All kinds of evil, he says. Yeah, the mind's got this stuff in it. It does. And when we accept the fragrance of jia, of ethical behavior, we transform. We clean it out. We purge it. It's true, he says, getting rid of. So here's somebody, let's walk that back. Here's a meditator, sixth patriarch, who's very tuned in to the mind. He knows what people are like. And he says, yeah, guess what? We got that stuff in us. But we also have the, we've also got that other level that when we tap it according to Dharma, out comes this other stuff. And it wins. It transforms. The poison's in there. Okay, now, being raised a Methodist from a Northern European Protestant stock, when I hear that, I tend to blame myself. I tend to get down on myself and feel guilty and bad about having that stuff in there. And I don't think that's necessary. Now maybe I shouldn't confess here because it's not for sure anybody else here was raised with that background. Some of us I know were. Why? You don't blame the ground for growing nettles, weeds, poison ivy, poison oak, mushrooms that'll kill you, and rhubarb, the leaves of which, if you eat them, are poisonous, has oxalis in it. You don't. The ground is neutral. The ground is impartial. It will grow anything. So those seeds, now, all those things that I mentioned, poison oak, what's the name of the nasty mushrooms? The death caps? Amanita muscaria. Mushrooms that grow happily in the Gold Coast, oh my. And should you eat one, and people do every year, you die. It turns your liver to liquid. The ground grows those things. They're only, quote, bad from the point of view of humans. Ask poison oak, are you bad? I grow. I'm here. Why would you discriminate against me? Well, because when I rub it on my human skin, I get this horrible irritation that bubbles up and keeps me from sleeping because it's so itchy. So, yes, from the point of view of my human life, I grade those things as weeds. Okay, weeds. Now, the ground grows those weeds impartially. The mind contains envy, jealousy, greed, anger, delusion, confusion, right? Covering, pride, low self-esteem, equally, as it does kindness, compassion, joy, serenity, etc. Okay? You don't blame the mind. You don't feel guilty about the mind for growing those things. What you do is identify them clearly as weedy thoughts. Okay, those are weed thoughts. If I follow those things, I'm going to do stuff that I will definitely hurt myself and hurt others. The sixth patriarch in this first incense, first perfuming that he talks about, he calls them he says, evil. He classifies those things as evil, which the mind contains. So, a cultivator who's listening to this and goes, yeah, I would actually want to change myself. I would like to change. What you do is you happily weed the mind of those thoughts with the jie xiang, with the incense of precepts. The way a gardener weeds a garden. Where I live down in Australia, part of the year, we're on a hillside, and at first couple years I was in this house, the hillside was just a hillside. There was a little driveway, and out of the hillside slanting like this, somebody had cut and made a foundation and then put the house in a driveway. But everything else was slant. It was hillside with a little plateau where the house was. 2-3 years ago, the nun who's there, the nuns who were there, said, we want to welcome the monks. We hope they'll stay. Let's expand their living space. So they made going down the slope, they made 3 more small terraces. And one of them included a nice pond with guanyin, and the rest was most decorative and put rocks as borders. So now it goes down the hill, and then the driveway and the house, and then terrace down to the bottom of the hill where there was a meadow. And so they're gardens, Those little terrace places, the flat places on the hillside, are used we put in a Bodhi tree, we have the pond, and a lot of native Aussie greenery. So it looks very nice. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is the natural state of the hillside is covered with anything. Branches, leaves, weeds, the occasional volunteer of plants you can recognize and use. Just, if you walk on it, you trip, right? Because it's just all scattered. It's forest floor. Once you define it as garden, you want to go in and pick the branches up, rake the leaves, keep the borders clean, and give it some order. And it looks like, there's living space for people. And turn your back for 1 week, and it goes right back to forest floor. Right? Go in there and pick it up with effort, and I see the garden now. Oh yeah, that's the shape. Right? It takes work to sweep the garden, to sweep the terrace, to weed the garden. And then it looks really nice. You can take a walk there, you can meditate there, you can watch the rain, you can photograph there. The animals like it. The birds and the critters come and take a look at what's been disturbed. So they might find some food there, and they can walk there and see the predators coming to sneak up on them quicker than they could when it was just forest floor, So everybody likes a garden. And it's effort, constant effort to keep it clean. That was the awareness. Oh my goodness, right? So you get the analogy that Sixth Patriarch says, right, we're going to transmit the jie xiang, the incense, the perfume, the cleansing air of precepts. And when you do that, you get rid of the stuff you don't want, the branches, the leaves, the garbage of, or the compost of greed, anger, stupidity, pride, doubt, etc. Okay? So what is that all called? That's called wisdom's practices with effort. It takes effort to do that. You've already said, I think I want to cultivate. Cultivation's good. I like that. I like a life with a standard. I like it when a standard is clear, right? People had one of those moments recently. Our First Lady, I won't name her, nobody's going to get a handle on this one. Our First Lady gave a speech 3 or 4 days ago, probably the most quoted single 27 minutes that I've seen on social media in a long time. People commented and said it was maybe the best, the first or second best political speech in a century. And what she was reacting to was falling standards. She said something that had happened recently in the current presidential campaign had troubled her and hurt her, and she was responding and saying, no, in fact, the things that were stated there are not the new standard. The old standards are still there, she said. Don't be confused about it. The old standards are still there. And that her pitch was, she wants her children and everyone's children to not lose sight of the old standards. That she wants her children to grow up in the same moral climate that she grew up in, because it's not different now. It's just that current events have changed the standard. And what she was doing was saying, no, actually remember, don't lose sight. Sweep the garden, you'll see it's the same shape it was before, even though there's a lot of branches and leaves fallen over the garden. Take a look, it's the same shape. And her speech did that. It was like, whew, oh yeah, thank you. That's true. It hasn't changed. Don't think that one person's influence changes everything. It doesn't. That person is out of standard, no longer standard, out of shape. That person needs to shape up. It's not that the shape has changed, right? So that was like, oh, wonderful. A great speech, by the way. So what the Sixth Patriarch is saying is, if you decide to cultivate, if you like that, here's a shape. There's a shape here that once you clean it with these methods, rufa. Remember that? Rufa. Do it according to Dharma, you're going to find there's a shape that actually, at a certain point of refinement, integrates with other pieces of the mind, and it becomes a different thing. When you apply those methods over time, you get a harmonic tone. Bum, 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 ba. You get the harmonic when you apply the method. There's a flip, and it makes a bigger piece than you had before. Okay? So, that's what he's talking about. And I borrowed the Sixth Patriarch Sutra to illustrate what's happening here because it's the same thing, I think. And it's called effortless practice. Master Hua said, I'm doing these 3 things with my mind all the time. From my consciousness point of view, no way. From Shifu's point of view, That's what's happening. You guys don't know yet because you haven't done it. You haven't integrated. You haven't seen the mind's function. So one question to call this all would be, what is my mind capable of? What can I do? The sutra says you can do this. It's not religious, makes no demands of faith or belonging. You don't have to identify in any way. It's still like a textbook saying this is possible. This is what the mind is capable of. Okay, done with that. Move on to the next, and the first of many pictures. First analogy here. It's the next to last three lines down on the bottom of 56. Let me read it here. 佛子譬如有二世界，一处杂染，一处清净，是二中间难可得过。唯除菩萨有大方便，神通愿力。Okay, to there. Disciples of the Buddha, in terms of difficulty, this is like having two worlds, one defiled and one pure. It's hard to go back and forth between two worlds unless one wields the strength of vows and the spiritual powers necessary to accomplish great skillful means. Okay. The wording here is a little convoluted, and I want to go through the Chinese to see if you all agree that I got it right. I had to massage the English to get it all to fit logically. Let's see if I did it right. Okay, I'm going to go to the Chinese right now. 佛子, disciples of the Buddha. 譬如有二世界. It's just like, or by analogy, let's say, or suppose, right? Suppose you had two worlds. Suppose you had two worlds. One, 一处, one place is 杂染, is mixed up and stained. Mixed up and stained. 一处, 纯净, one place is spotlessly pure. The second place is immaculate. Okay? Suppose you have two worlds. One's a mess, the other's immaculate. Okay? Now, let's stop there for a minute. Two worlds, 世界. So that's hard to grasp right away because why? We got one world. But, worlds, we don't want to think globes necessarily or planets necessarily. I think 世界 here, let's follow me, allow me to give a picture here. If we think of a world as a place where people live, think of the world in terms of its inhabitants. So it's not so much the physical place, it's the state of the inhabitants, the people who live there, the beings who live there. For example, simple one, if you're a human and you see a dog and a cat approach each other, you go, oh, kitty and puppy, right? They're both really cute. Same world, same dog. The dog looks at the cat and has a very different perspective on the cat than you do, right? The dog, depending on the age of the dog, will go up and try to lick the cat, right? And the cat's like, the cat is like, get away from me, right? Cats don't like dogs. They're just too sloppy, you know. They don't pay homage to the cat. The cat wants dogs to respect. And the cat's like, you are just too coarse, you know. And from the dog's like, oh, puppy friend, hey, hi, kitty, how you doing? And the cat's like, you know, get back. So totally same world, same, but different perspective entirely, right? What if the cat sees a mouse? Oh, or a fish. Oh, or a bird. Oh, cats are predators. They eat those things. Suddenly, for you, it's like, oh, goldfish. Oh, parakeet. Oh, look, a mousey. The cat's like, same world? No, totally different world. Based on the mindset of the beings who live there, the inhabitants. So minds are different, right? I discovered today that I have relatives who are voting for the other side. Recently, they're supporting the other side, despite everything. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. What's different? How can you say it? It's like a lot of things are different. And I'm sure, here's another one. Now let's move away from that very contentious image. People talk about Big Sur as being clearly another planet, right? Clearly, let's just say Berkeley, the People's Republic of Berkeley, okay? When I tell people in the East Coast, for example, that I live in Berkeley, California, the response by and large is, oh boy, oh you do you? We know about Berkeley. We know about that place, People have the image of Berkeley around the world, not unearned either, is that Berkeley is a place where people's views and behavior are very, very different than anywhere else in the country. That's pretty much the perspective. And yet, in Berkeley, when I step out onto Shattuck Avenue, or Telegraph Avenue, or 4th Street, people look at me as the strangest part of Berkeley. That as if I came from another world entirely. Because why? Look, I don't dress like anybody. I have a different haircut than almost any among religious people. I was going to use Big Sur because we had this funny experience. Big Sur, from Berkeley's point of view, Big Sur is far out. Big Sur is this coastline on the central coast of California, north of Santa Barbara. And if you can live in Big Sur, you're unusually tough individual because it's something about Big Sur breeds radical behavior, right? The way the rest of the country sees Berkeley as radical place, Berkeley sees Big Sur as a radical place. And when Marty, former Heng Chow, and I did 3 Steps, 1 Bow, we're bowing along through Big Sur, and we passed the Big Sur Inn, and there were 2 old-timers on the porch, sitting in rocking chairs on the porch, and we were bowing along. It's very quiet there, because there's only a creek and occasional seagull. And one guy said, Ben, how long you lived here? Well, I don't know, most on to 40 years. Yeah, me too. Those 2 clowns are the weirdest thing I've ever seen here in 40 years. What do you make of that? I have no idea. That's pretty strange. So, in terms of Big Sur, 2 monks doing 3 Steps, 1 Bow are the strangest thing through Big Sur in 40 years. So, right, different worlds. Right? Same air, breathing the same air, same coordinates. If you, from a tracking satellite, wanted to give latitude and longitude, same coordinates, drinking the same water, very different worlds. So that's, I think, the way we want to look at this. There are 2 worlds, not so much planet, not so much, in a world far away, like the movie trailers. I think it's this. It's in like having two worlds, two states of mind. Can we do that? Can we go shijie and make it a jingjie? Two mental states. One is defiled and one is pure. The defiled state might be somebody who comes into a church with the thought that he's going to kill people. That's a defiled thought. You go into a spiritual space and you are looking to end lives. Okay? That would be a defiled thought. The person next to you in the circle, sitting on the couch in the friendship circle in the basement of the church, is thinking, how can I benefit? What can I give to this young person whose eyes look so feverish, right? How can we calm this person down and give them peace of mind? That's a pure world, coexisting. Okay, got it? I'm just kind of fishing around to try to make sense of how we could imagine two worlds that are not thinking of Mars and Venus, or Jupiter and Saturn. Okay, in terms of difficulty, in English, I added that. In terms of difficulty, so that this would make sense. 譬如有20界. For example, suppose you had two worlds. One place was stained and polluted. The other space was pristine, immaculate. 是二中间难可得过. To cross from one to the other is hard. 是二中间, these two in between, 难可得过, really hard to get across from one to the other. There's the word nan. So I put it up in the front. In terms of difficulty, this is like having two worlds, one defiled and one pure. It's hard to go back and forth between the two worlds. Okay, that's not the whole idea though, and that's why this sentence becomes complicated. 唯除, only except, or the only way it works is when 菩萨有大方便神通愿力. A bodhisattva has big 方便 expedient skills, 神通 psychic abilities, and 愿力 the power of vows. Okay, so to stitch that whole thought together, I had to rebuild the Chinese, which I think is okay. I think the translation holds here. So, disciples of the Buddha, in terms of difficulty, it's like having two worlds, one defiled and one pure. It's hard to go back and forth between them unless you are a bodhisattva with wields. I use that verb. Unless you have the strength of vows and spiritual powers necessary to accomplish fangbian. Okay, let's move away from the Chinese and unpack the English. So, a bodhisattva wants to help people end their suffering. It's got a cat and a bird. The bird doesn't want to be eaten. The cat wants to eat. How are you going to let them live, coexist? How are you going to get them to coexist? You have to bridge that somehow. You have an election. One group strongly, seemingly against all rationality, supports one candidate and actively opposes the other candidate, while the other side uses phrases like better together and let's all get along, and doesn't seem to bear enmity to the other candidate but doesn't agree with them. They're very different. How do you allow the country to survive and thrive? You need a bodhisattva somehow in there making it better. You've got people who live in very different value systems trying to communicate and then live together. How do you do it? Bodhisattvas can make sense of those two if they have skill and means. In other words, lots of techniques, real understanding, bridge building, and the power of vows, which will what? Keep them at it so they don't quit. In other words, lots of the word is fuel, lots of motives, lots of initiative, stick to it. I'm missing my word. The reasons why. They have plenty of fuel for their resolve, lots of resolve. And then they've got extraordinary abilities, shentong, psychic abilities to understand when to say what and when to not say what, and when to appear in this way but then to flip it around. All the things that psychic abilities allow them to do. That's how you bridge those two. Okay, analogy. Back to the main theme. How do you go from wisdom's effortful power to effortless power? That's how hard it is. Because you're actually transforming the substance of your mind. Right? So this is an analogy to get us closer to understanding what the Bodhisattva does from ground 7 to ground 8. Okay? Hard. It's hard to do. But it can be done. And the difference is rufa. You do it according to Dharma. And Dharma methods are strong enough to do that. They can actually flip us over. And what's waiting on the other side? Buddhahood. But Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi Buddhahood, not just the samadhi of an arhat. This is all the mind's function. The mind can do all this stuff, but it's not easy to do. Okay? Now, I'm going to, that's a lot. And I see people are kind of full of that already. Let's talk about the kind of the daily stuff of how it happens. To do this, for me, this is hard because it's not my state. I'm punching over my weight, you say. To be able to do the meditation that you have to do to get here, you have to go through a state where everything you know is wrong. And don't move. You have to go through a state where the new information coming in makes no sense, but you have to be patient. And the word that keeps coming up over and over and over again is patience. You have to be patient while your body disintegrates. And you have to be patient while your feelings, the second skandha, just turn out to betray you. You can't trust them. But you don't get rid of them either. You have to go through a state where your thoughts are utterly unreliable, but you have to stay sane and be patient. You go through a state where your samskaras, those inner functions, all change. What are we talking about? Breathing, heartbeat, metabolism, sleep, rhythms, digestion, all that stuff goes wacko, and there's nobody there to tell you what's happening. And what do you have to do? Be patient. You wait it out. Because why? Everything you've been doing step by step has prepared you for this, but only in smaller steps. All the basics are still true. Which is what? Don't attach. Understand that this is a jingjie. It's just a state. You're not a Buddha yet. Don't quit. Keep going. Anything you attach to will wind up obstructing you. You still have to eat lunch at lunchtime. Tomorrow's another day. Okay? So that's the kind of the physical, emotional, spiritual, mental strength you need to keep going step by step. And then there's all the other extraneous stuff that comes up while you're doing this, like beings coming out of empty space and saying, "Oh, you're a Buddha. Congratulations, we've been waiting for you. How wonderful. What is your Buddha's name? You're shedding light. Did you know that? Do you realize how popular you're going to be?" Whatever it is you want, these beings come and tell you, "Congratulations, you've got it." You know, subtle states, you know. And you have to go, meanwhile, why am I hearing voices in space? I better go meditate. You know, thanks very much. Not interested. It's just like telemarketers, right? Telemarketers. "Congratulations, you have been nominated to win 2 tickets on a cruise to Cabo San Lucas." Why are you calling on my phone to sell me something I don't want? You know. It's telemarketing. Those voices that are there telling you how wonderful you are just trying to sell you something. You have to know that. And 10 out of 10 times it is. It's not that you wait 9 times and the 10th time you go for it. Sorry. You bit the hook. So it's tricky. And there aren't 100 people around you modeling for you how to do it. You have to use the teachings from your teacher that maybe you got secondhand or thirdhand. You have to look at the ancients. You have to look at the Song of Enlightenment and Sixth Patriarch and Master Shuyan's Kaishers and keep going. And know that the simplest is probably true. And it's hard to do that patiently, right? They talk about 3 kinds of patience, and the hardest one is wushang faran, patience when dharmas no longer arise. And that's the big moment that's coming up in the 7th and 8th ground, describing abhaivartika, abi bhaji wushang faran, right? Patience when dharmas no longer arise. You're there meditating, and everything you see that's dharmas don't come into being, and they don't go away. They've always been there. But you know that everything's impermanent. And it's like, be patient, yeah. You're what? Flipping over to Wu Gong Yong Hang. Flipping over to effortless. It's really hard. Don't take it from me, it's not my state. But I think that's what's going on. And the Bodhisattva, because he's getting this step by step, his foundation, her foundation is built on precepts and concentration and wisdom. So you make it. And not everyone does. Some don't. But you make it. How about that? Any feedback? Is this scary? This is really a meditator's realm. This is where stillness takes you through Next week we're going to have more text. We're going to expand our books next week. And Guanyin Bodhisattva's session is happening. Starting tonight at CTDB, a lot of us will be going up. Here's this is one of those poetic moments that takes us to that same place where you've done everything that you thought you were supposed to do. You did everything right, and things are going wrong. It's that same kind of cognitive dissonance where dharmas no longer arise, but everything you've known says things are impermanent. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man, woman? Question. How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. So this song asks 9 questions, and each question is one of those contradictions. We have to answer it in ourselves with patience. Right? How many years can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? A mountain of ignorance? Hatred? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Women, for example. That's why the First Lady's speech was so powerful, because she cut across politics, talking about men's treatment of women, speaking as a woman. How many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Doesn't mean there's no answer. It means we have to answer the question ourselves. It's your own decision. How many times must a man, woman look up? I've heard people change the pronoun here. How many times must a woman look up before she can see the sky? You look up so much, but you never see the sky. How many ears must one person have before they can hear people cry? And in our tradition, Guanyin Bodhisattva is said to have 1,000 years. How many deaths will it take till he, she knows, meaning God, will we know that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Relevant, particularly in that Bob Dylan got some recognition this week from the Nobel Committee, and it's that his songs transcend. He's a poet, he's a songwriter, so his poetry reaches a different audience than simple literature would, literature without the music. But I think the Nobel Committee is always looking for someone who's writing, whether it be lyrics or interviews. They gave a Nobel Prize in Literature to a book of interviews, to novels, to poetry, that influences its times. And Bob Dylan's songs influenced my generation and generations to come in a way that no one else did. It's hard to calculate the prophetic power of these songs. We heard them and were changed by them, and they became the anthems. They became the heartbeat of something that had been brewing, had been fomenting, but hadn't had expression until these songs came forth. And that's why they lived. They captured the spirit of the times. If you know it, sing along. How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man, woman? How many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they are forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Sing along. The answer is blowing in the wind. In other words, you have to answer it yourself. How many years can a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? How many times can a man turn his head, pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? How many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? How many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. So, a lot of people said, "What? Bob Dylan? How is that worth a Nobel Prize in Literature?" And probably those are people who never heard his music. And the people who heard his music and whose lives were changed by the power of these said, "It's about time. It's about time." So, I've got a guitar in my hands. Why don't we transfer the merit for those folks who want to sign off, if you might be listening abroad or in the East Coast, it's midnight in the East Coast if you're watching. And then we'll do another Bob Dylan song after that, just because we're celebrating Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize tonight. So, dedication of merit is for those whose lives will be changed by what they call a storm without precedent, unprecedented big storm blowing right this minute up and down the California coast, and the other climate disasters happening around the world. Honeybees. Honeybees. A third of our food requires pollination by the berry bees that are, they get confused and can't find their hives. They get lost. Some people say because of chemicals created by Monsanto company. Others say other theories. Whatever the cause, something should be done, because you can't eat Roundup. You can't eat chemical, fertilizer, insecticide, herbicides. Honeybees are essential. We should figure out what's killing them and stop it. Transfer the merit that people wake up to that necessity. Whatever it is you'd care to share, let's do that. May every living be our minds as one and radiant with light. Share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see, our hands and hearts can find in giving unity. May our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Imagine if your mind had already flipped over to effortless cultivation and you transferred. Ooh. What kind of, how far would it go? How far would that merit go? Well, gee whiz. I have three songs I would love to sing, but that's too many. And I need to choose all of them. All of them. How late do you want to stay? Do you bring your flashlight and your sleeping bag? Woo. this is, I got two that I really like here. Can't do them both, have to pick one. One is called When the Ship Comes In. And it's, at the time, we loved singing this song because it sounded like there was an army from heaven coming down to smite everyone we didn't like. It was not a very elevating song. It was about power. And the reason why it was so important was this was a time when the powers that be suddenly we were able to question authority. That was what was new, brand new. And in America, we were responding to something that was happening in France, it was happening in Germany, it was happening in Japan. Around the world, a generation was starting to say, oh yeah, I don't think so. I disagree. The seminal precipitating event in America, among other things, was the draft. The draft was instituted. You got a letter from your local draft board saying, congratulations, you will report for a physical, and if you are inducted, you are now part of the American Armed Forces. And at the time, that meant that your life might well be over in 4 months, because you would find yourself shot dead behind a banana tree in Vietnam, or shot out of a helicopter over Da Nang. And everybody I knew someone who that happened to. The problem was that war was illegal. It was a contrived war. There was no threat to America's sovereignty that required us to go over to Vietnam and kill about 1 million people, 55,000 of whom were ours. The rest were Vietnamese and Laotians and Cambodians, and et cetera, et cetera. So we don't want to stir it up now. But young people for the first time faced their mortality suddenly and said, hell no, we won't go. Right? And that had never, ever happened in America. We had come out of what the Eisenhower generation, my parents' generation, the Eisenhower generation was the generation of the three-piece suit, the button-down collar, and you did what you were told. You got in line. You shaved your hair was this long, and you looked alike, believed alike, drank the same Coca-Cola, drove the same Fords and Chevys, and didn't ask questions. Until suddenly people were disappearing and dying. And we asked why, and the answer was, because we tell you to. Right? And that was, for the first time, young people were going, no, not going to do that. And there were all other things happening, social changes, but that was a large part of it in our country. In France it was different, in Japan it was different, in Germany it was different, but the same questioning was happening. And this song gave a sense of common purpose and unity. The hour that the ship comes in, right? And the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be breathing, like the stillness in the wind before the hurricane begins. The hour the ship comes in. Then the seas will split and the ship will hit and the sands on the shoreline will be shaken, and the tide will sound and the wind will pound and the morning will be breaking. This is prophetic. This is Bob Dylan at his most prophetic. Oh, the fishes will laugh as they swim out of the path, and the seagulls, they'll be smiling. and the rocks on the sand will proudly stand the hour that the ship comes in. And the words that are used to get the ship confused will not be understood as they're spoken. For the chains of the sea will have busted in the night and be buried on the bottom of the ocean. Right? It's like, we're strong. With us, suddenly we're strong. And who's the ship? Right? A song will lift as the mainsail shifts and the boat drifts out on the shoreline, and the sun will respect every face on the deck the hour that the ship comes in. Then the sands will roll out a carpet of gold for your weary toes to be a-touchin', and the ship's wise men will remind you once again that the whole wide world is watching. Now that line came out of this song and became a watchword for movements of all kinds. The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching. As the Chicago police break the heads of students and reporters and congressmen alike in their police riot, the whole world is watching. Came from this song. Oh, this is the last line. This is the victory line, right? Oh, the foes will rise with their sleep still in their eyes, and they'll jerk from their beds and think they're dreamin'. And they'll pinch themselves and squeal, and they'll know that it's for real, the hour that the ship comes in. Then they'll raise their hands, and they'll meet all our demands, but we'll shout from the bow, your days are numbered. And like Pharaoh's triumph, they'll be drowned in the tide, and like Goliath, they'll be conquered. Right? Powerful language. This was used in the civil rights movement, when Bull Connor and his police and his dogs and his fire hoses broke the heads of grandmothers and teenagers alike who were simply walking down the highway. And they said, you're Goliath, we're David, we're going to beat you. Using Christian, biblical, Grecian imagery to say the powerless become the powerful. Because for the first time, young people were saying, no, we don't agree. And if you just say that, well, fine, your head's broken, you're in jail. But when 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000, when the nation sings this song together, it's like, oh, okay, we got some power. We're different. Now we prevail. So here's the one I wanted to pick out to sing. This was another one that had this prophetic ring to it. And when you sang it, you were transformed. Your opinion suddenly became a movement, and things changed. Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Come writers and critics who prophesy with your pens, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. Don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no tellin' who that it's namin', for the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changin'. That's got the Tao in it, yin and yang. It's got the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, Jesus' words, right? Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the hall. He who gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside, and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are changing. That echoes Sproul Plaza, 15 minutes from where we're sitting, which is where young people occupied the hall and the administration building, and we sparked off a visible moment that was echoed around the country and around the world, here in Berkeley. Then the telling line that people might say is not unfilial, but only if filiality means obedience, only, instead of righteous. or correct. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land. Don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand, for the times they are a-changing. There's wisdom there in generational, but when it's done with the melody and these words, it's got power. This was a time when large institutions shifted. The old ways were rapidly aging. The last line is very prophetic, right? The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading. The first one now will later be the last, for the times they are a-changing. So Dylan gets, he wrote it down. He said it, and he sang it. This is literature that influenced millions, and to this day still echoes. So I thought I might share that one. Gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accepted that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, and you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the time they are a-changing. Writers and critics who prophesize with your pens, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the time they are a-changing. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the time they are a-changing. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. The old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the time they are a-changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be the last. Oh, the times they are a-changing. So you can see how these songs just were more than songs somehow. It was indeed, it was literature of the finest kind, because it gave people who needed a voice words to engage their mind as they responded to what they were feeling. That's literature, right? It gives you language for emotion, intellect, inspiration, vision. The other thing that it gives you is something to share. And that was shared across the country. You would travel and you discover that people here knew those songs. And you'd sing them together. And people there knew those songs. And you sang them together. And my identity at the time, I was a jock. I was an athlete. That was what I did. I wasn't very good in school. I was ordinary, and I didn't have any other kind of identity. But I was an athlete. I was absolutely not a singer. Music was not part of my world. But then I heard Peter, Paul, and Mary singing. I think I've told you this. The first thing I heard them sing was a Pete Seeger song, right? If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning. And I wanted to do that. Bad. I really wanted to do that. I thought, what's that? If I had a hammer. You don't know that, Alan? Oh, okay, I have to teach that to you. Yeah, that's the first, we should probably, that would be a tease if I didn't do it, right? It's not long, so, okay. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out a warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, compassion between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. I wanted to do this so bad. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out a warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Anybody know it? Anybody singing along quietly? If I had a best song, I'd sing it in the morning and sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this. Of course, Buddhists don't sing about love, right? Okay. Now I've got a hammer and I've got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between all over this land. That's what I wanted to do, and that was the song. That made it onto the hit parade. That made it onto the top 40. And I heard it on my Hitachi transistor radio, which is kind of my first, step into, I guess, adulthood. Was I had a transistor radio, and the transistor radio linked you to the world. Because why? oh, the other kids are listening to these songs. And this is, quote, popular. It's number 1 on the top 40, right? So that song was not bubblegum. Most of the top 40 was bubblegum, or Gene Pitney's Town Without Pity, a love song, or the kids in the Bristol are sharp as a pistol when they do the Bristol stomp, or, right, the Peppermint Twist. That was a popular song. David is nodding his head, right? Bop, boo bop, a shapa-dapa, boo bop, right? The Peppermint Twist. And Chubby Checker. Hey now everybody in the Union Hall, And you could listen to that and you go, okay, I kind of like it. Peter, Paul, and Mary are going, it's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brother. And you go, what? What was that? Somebody's actually talking about something that matters. So I heard that on the radio. I thought, I want it. It was music that you could approach. So I found my friends who heard the same music and got moved the same way, picked up guitars and said, how do you, this is called a C chord. Strum, that kind of sounds like strum, then you go strum, strumma, strumma. That sounds like Peter, Paul, and Mary. They're singing Pete Seeger? Who's Pete Seeger? Oh, so that's it. And then Pete Seeger says, I want you all to hear the voice of the younger generation. His name is Bob Dylan. Pete Seeger introduced the world to Bob Dylan. Peter, Paul, and Mary introduced the world to Blowing in the Wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. It made it to the top 40. Suddenly, Bob Dylan's songs were being played all over the country, along with bop doo ba shapa dapa doo ba, right? And suddenly it was like, oh, I can do that. That speaks to me. A generation found its music, right? Meanwhile, and Motown was going on, which was fine, and Stevie Wonder was going on, but those songs were the same, Love songs are the same, no different. This was different, and it lifted people. And it gave us a voice and a vision. Suddenly, that was the biggest difference. Suddenly, you're seeing farther. A love song, what do you see? Oh, I'm hurting. Broken heart. Oh, that's just you. Maybe somebody you can, knows your broken heart. But if you're saying, how many years can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? You go, that's very deep. Yeah, I never thought of that before. And here's somebody who's put it into a song and asking it with powerfully, and cleanly. And you go, sing that again. And then you find friends who are going, yeah, you do the F, and then the F becomes a G, and then you C down to A minor, and the F to a G to a C, and you go, I can do that, And then people want to listen to you passing it on. And then they get, So that was the moment. And on Friday night, my buddies and I would go to somebody's basement. My basement was part of it once, and we would get old wine bottles and stick a candle in it and light the candle until it dripped down over the bottle. We'd turn the lights off, and we would have candles on tables, and we didn't drink wine. We didn't have wine, but we would drink whatever, Coke or whatever it was, and play songs for each other and teach each other how to do it. We called it coffee house. And we were in Toledo, Ohio. We didn't have coffee houses in Toledo, Ohio. We made coffee houses in our basements. And I had half a dozen friends who would do this week after week, and we learned a bunch of songs. And we would eventually become a folk group, called ourselves the Glass City Singers, Toledo, Ohio, Glass City Singers. And people, I'll never forget, the there was an African-American man, Ron Coleman, who had a powerful, wonderful voice. And Ron was so handsome. He was such a good-looking man. And he stepped out on stage, and all the girls were like, sing something? You know, does he sing too? Or does he just stand there? That's enough if he just stands there. You know, and Ron really sings. And my friend Gary Solomon and Eric Weiss and Donnie Eggenschweiler and I were the Glass City Singers. And we were at the St. Vincent Hospital's parking lot where they had a stage to do some sort of a, what was the event? It was some sort of a, I don't think the words cultural diversity existed then, but it was some kind of an event. And they needed entertainment, and I think it was Ron Coleman got us invited, and we stood up on stage and sang If I Had a Hammer as the Glass City Singers. And people applauded, and they nodded their heads, and it didn't matter that I'd forgotten the chords halfway through and my capo fell off the guitar. It didn't matter that. We had done it, and we performed, and we got down off the stage, and I was different. I had just sung a Pete Seeger song in front of 100 people in the parking lot of St. Vincent's Hospital, and I was a folk singer. I think I was 15. And I just did it. That was 15, 60, 50. I was 50 years ago. That was half a century ago. And I'm still doing it, introducing these songs to new ears. And they still got it. These songs still make a difference. And you hear it and you go, oh, what's that? So this is the literature of a generation. And when you put Dharma lyrics behind the very same chords, people listen, right? So I'm still crossing over from defiled worlds to pure worlds. How do you do that? How do you play a defiled instrument that can also make you want to dance and boogie woogie? And instead, you're singing, may every living being, our minds is one, This is Bob Dylan night, but my Dharma songs came from Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger, and Peter Paul and Mary, and Judy Collins, and Ian and Sylvia, and the Kingston Trio, and the Chad Mitchell Trio, and all these men and women who took these songs and, sent them out into the world. So, anyway, that's just a little bit of that the Nobel Committee in Sweden said Bob Dylan is an artist and a writer whose literature has transcended him, has gone beyond him, has influenced a generation. And I go, yes, thank you. 50 years ago, I thought so too. You're right. This is a voice that will survive. Anyway, we're in the business of, if I could become the Buddhist Pete Seeger, I would feel like I hadn't wasted my time, The other one I didn't sing was, I've done it here before, With God on Our Side. Oh, my name, it ain't nothing, my age, it means less. And the country I come from is called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there the laws to abide, and that the land that I live in has God on its side. Right? You all know that one? It's a great contradiction. Talk about, cognitive dissonance. Everybody who goes in the war is sure God's on their side. Does anybody ever start a war going into battle thinking God's on their side? We're godless? Never. How could that be? How is that possible? Right? Oh, the history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry's charged, the Indians fell. The cavalry's charged, the Indians died. Oh, the country was young with God on its side. Oh, the Spanish-American War had its day, and the Civil War too was soon laid away. Oh, the names of the heroes I was made to memorize, with guns in their hands and God on their side. Really? Oh, the First World War, boys, came and it went. The reason for fighting I never did get, but I learned to accept it, and accept it with pride, for you don't count the dead when God's on your side. Well, the Second World War came to an end. We forgave the Germans, and then we were friends. You ready? They murdered 6 million in the ovens they fried. The Germans now too have God on their side. It's pretty hard on Germans. Oh, I learned to hate the Russians through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely with God on their side. But now we have weapons of chemical dust. If fire them we're forced to, then fire them we must. One push of the button, a shot the world wide. But you never ask questions when God's on your side. Through many dark hours I've been thinking about this, that Jesus Christ was betrayed by a kiss. I can't think for you. You'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side. You have to be a Christian to know that one. Right. Last verse. So now as I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling, no tongue can tell. The words fill my head, and they fall to the floor. If God's on our side, He'll stop the next war. Thank you, Bob Dylan. Okay, we've gone overtime, but we're celebrating Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize tonight. So, like that, I think I have another 20. I memorized a lot of Bob Dylan. So, what's that? Bob Dylan month, sure. Yep. And these are all his prophetic. This is the early Bob Dylan. The next, he kept changing. The next level of Bob Dylan. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. I'm not sleeping and there is no place I'm going to. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. In the jingle jangle morning I'll come following you. This is the mystical Bob Dylan. It's full of imagery, and it's away from these. This was the protest song, the songs that woke a generation up. The next Bob Dylan was the lyrical, mystical poet. And then he changed again, and he changed again and again. It is his output, 50 years of Bob Dylan. Okay, let's see, Guanyin session starting at CTDB tonight. People will be going up. Otherwise, everything is the same. Jin Fo Shi announced today at lunch that we're starting a Chinese class for people who want to read the texts of the sutras and the ceremonies. It's a class that's going to meet what time? When you 什么时候上课? Okay, Saturday 3 to 5 in our dining room. If people would like to, no, it's not online. You have to be here. Sorry, online folks. You have to actually go there. If you'd like to look at these texts from the point of view of the Chinese characters, he's going to lead us into understanding them through the means of writing with a brush, writing with a Chinese maobi, with a writing brush. So it's a calligraphy class and a reading class and a comprehension class for the Chinese texts. So you can start next week? When do we start? Next week. Okay. Next Saturday in the Berkeley Monastery dining room at 3 to 5. 3 to 5, a couple hours. So calligraphy, reading of Chinese texts and ceremonies, and learning the characters that they're written in. Okay, Qin Shan Shi, any other announcements? Not, huh? Nope. Okay. Usual happenings, that's right, yeah. Okay, drive carefully through the storm. Tomorrow is supposed to be a big one. If you have to travel, make sure you take yourself plenty of time. And we'll see you all next week. 事到自尽，非道自退，在善而从，不善而改, he said. If you need to bow from your knees, you can do that. Don't stand up before your feet are back. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Namo Da Fang Guang Fu Hua Yan Ji Hua Yan Hai Fu